So, high conflict personalities all tend to follow a similar playbook. And understanding the cycle is key to breaking it. So, if you are in a stage of confusion and distress currently in your relationship with your high conflict partner, I hope that this is helpful to you in understanding a little bit more about how the cycle typically progresses and identify the phases that a high conflict relationship includes. And you may be at a point in your relationship with your partner that you are not even aware of what has happened. Up until this point, you may not have described your partner as high conflict or narcissistic, and you may just be coming to the realization that they have a certain type of personality, that they are controlling, and they use manipulation tactics to exert power and control over you. So this lesson is designed to give a little more context around what the relationship cycle looks like so that you can recognize the familiar patterns and hopefully provide some additional comfort as you understand that this is a playbook that controlling and toxic partners use. And hopefully going through this lesson will give you some additional comfort in understanding the cycle. I created this lesson because high conflict and narcissistic relationships follow a familiar pattern. And understanding that cycle helps explain the confusion that you might be feeling and the attachment that you might still feel to your partner, and often the self doubt that occurs when you're in a relationship like this. Here's what the cycle typically looks like. This is the typical pattern that narcissists and narcissistic personalities will follow in their relationships. The first phase is idealization. So there's initial admiration. This is where we see love bombing, infatuation, everything seems great. Typically, an indicator of this phase is that things are moving way too fast and it almost seems too good to be true. So when you first meet a partner like this, oftentimes you think, this person is my soulmate. We're meant to be together. You might be hearing that from your partner that they've never met anybody like you. They knew when they met you that you were meant to be together. They know that they're your soulmate. They might spend a lot of time talking about the future plans together, and this will happen, in retrospect. If you looked back, this is happening a little bit too much too soon, and they're coming in really, really strong. So this is the love bombing or idealization phase where the partner idealizes you and thinks you are the perfect partner for them initially. And obviously, because no one is perfect, this leads to unrealistic expectations. So the high conflict partner thinks, finally met the one. This time it's the one for me. But very quickly, the pedestal that they've created and put you on in their mind falls apart because it's not based in reality. It's based in their fantasy and their idealized image of you. So eventually, this leads to devaluation. And this is where the positive traits that the narcissist or high conflict personality saw in you start to fade. And they start to see, quote unquote, hidden flaws in their partner. And all along, you're the same person that you always have been. You don't have hidden flaws, and there's nothing wrong with you. But the way a narcissist's mind works is that they believed the idealization that was happening originally. So when something happens that shows you're just simply human and you have human needs and feelings like any normal person would, they can't absorb that. They can't handle that due to their personality disorder. So they see that as almost a form of betrayal. Oh my gosh, I thought this was the perfect person for me. And now I'm seeing all of her hidden flaws. Now I'm seeing all of his things that are wrong with him. It's not based in reality. This is just how their mind works. And eventually that leads to what we call the discard. And this is where your high conflict partner discards you in some way. The relationship is abruptly ended or abandoned. And this doesn't have to be a complete breakup or a discard in a physical sense. For example, if you're married to a person like this, they can discard you within the relationship where they discard you emotionally and they pull away and you start to feel like things are different, they're very distant, they're not connected to you anymore. That can happen while you're married or in a long-term relationship with this person. So they might not leave you or divorce you or leave the marriage. They might simply withdraw, but in their mind they have discarded you, and it can feel very abrupt when you're on the receiving end of that. So if you have been in a relationship where you felt the hot and cold, or this emotional distance came out of nowhere, that likely was part of the discard phase. Eventually, the high conflict personality makes his or her way to the hoovering stage. And this is where, if they have discarded you, either emotionally, physically, moved out, broken up with you, ended the relationship, initiated a separation, whatever it might be, eventually they will realize that they need to regain some control over you, because your response to that eventually is going to be that you start to pull away as well, because you don't understand what's happening. You may be suffering silently and not getting the answers that you want from this person, but eventually you're going to start to pull away, and they'll start to realize, okay, I'm losing control over this person. Even though I discarded them, I need to maintain control. So I've got to get them back under my power and control. Because the way a narcissist or high conflict personality views you is as a possession. So you belong to them. And even if they are, quote, done with you, it's almost like a child playing with a toy, and they think like, okay, I'm done with this toy for now, I'm going to put it on the shelf, but nobody else better touch my toy. That's how they view you, as a possession. So they might be done with you for the time being, but they still want you to belong to them, and they still want to have you under their power and control. So eventually they'll come back around and hoover. So this phase can look like where they try to reconnect with you, they promise to do better, they want to rekindle the relationship, and all of these manipulative behaviors that you might see, regardless of what they are telling you, all of these behaviors are based on one thing, and that is that they want to get you back under their control. They want to know that they still have you, that they still have access to you, and they still control you, and they can basically do whatever they want to you, treat you as poorly as they desire, and do whatever they feel like doing, but then they're always able to come back and get you back in. That's the hoovering phase. And you can also see this in something called reverse hoovering, which is where they get you to hoover yourself back in. So they might go into a complete, after the discard, go into a silent treatment where they just completely stop speaking to you, and it's so painful and cruel that you're left wondering what's happening here. I just want to have peace. I just want this emotional pain to go away. And so you hoover yourself back in, and that's called a reverse hoover, where you basically go to them, to go to your partner, and you say, I'm sorry. I just want this to end. Like, I don't know what I did, but I'm sorry. And that's what a reverse Hoover looks like. And then they, reluctantly agree to like take you back in and act like they're doing you a favor. And all of that is part of their cycle. So this will eventually repeat itself. They never go fully back to a full idealization of you like it was at the beginning, but they might at the end, when they're trying to hoover you back in, go into repeated love bombing or attempts to get you, back under their control by saying, "Oh, we always were so great together, we have so much history, we need to work this out for the kids," whatever it might be. They'll come around in like a mini love bombing phase to restart that cycle all over again, and it will go through these phases all over again. So with a high conflict personality, you are going to see good times, because if there weren't good times, nobody would ever stay if there weren't high points. And so being with a person like this is an emotional roller coaster. There's highs and lows, because they know if they don't sprinkle in a little bit of good times, you're never going to stay. Eventually, you're going to get tired of that. So they have to, in this cycle, sprinkle in those high points and those times where everything feels like it's good. So they do that just enough to keep you where they want you. And we covered this in the last slide, but I want to go into a few more details on each of the phases. Idealization is also known as love bombing. And we talked about this intense affection, attention to you. You feel chosen or special. There's really quick emotional intimacy where it's, again, too much too soon. And there's big promises of future talk. And we call this future faking. And then moving into the devaluation phase, the about face. And this is typically what it looks like when this is happening to you, but the increased criticism, they're always moving the goalposts. So no matter what you do, they might say to you, well, if you would just do this, then everything would improve. So you do that, and then they move the goalpost and it's a new point you have to hit, something else that's wrong with you that you have to fix. So it's never ever enough. And again, there's a lot of emotional withdrawal here where you can feel them pulling away, and they might overtly blame you and tell you it's your fault. They're pulling away, or they're not feeling it anymore because of fill in the blank that you did, or they might subtly blame you and not come right out and say it, but make you feel like it's your fault. So as a result, what do you start doing? You start trying harder, they're giving less. It's like an invisible light switch has flipped for them, and in their mind you have somehow disappointed them or let them down just by doing something that showed you were human. So it's typically how the devaluation phase starts. And then moving into the discard phase, which is, I'm done with you. So the withdrawal, the threats of leaving, the emotional abandonment, replacing you either emotionally or physically with another partner. This is often tied in with infidelity. So the phase can be running in parallel with them beginning an affair, having an affair. Maybe it starts as an emotional affair and then it turns into a physical affair. So they are, quote unquote, replacing you during this discard phase. And as I mentioned before, you can be discarded emotionally. They don't always physically leave or even end the relationship. Most high conflict personalities and narcissists are quite happy to have their cake and eat it too. So as long as you're staying right where they want you and you're being compliant and putting up with what they're doing, they see no reason to formally end the relationship or end it with any kind of finality. Most of the time, they're happy to just keep you in your confused state so they can circle back around when they need something from you. So keep in mind in the discard phase, it doesn't always mean that they're ending the relationship or breaking up with you or asking for divorce. They can just be emotionally withdrawn and moving on to someone else in a fair situation typically. And then we talked about hoovering. So the reverse hoover I mentioned on the previous slide, but they will come back around or they will get you to come back around through their manipulation tactics. So if they do the hoovering, it looks like apologies, sudden kindness, nostalgia, like I mentioned when they start talking about all these good memories that you have together. And then it's often accompanied by promises to change. And then when they try to reverse hoover you, it's again using the silent treatment and just making your life so miserable that you hoover yourself back in and you apologize just to move on with your life and get things back to where they used to be. So, why is this cycle so confusing? Part of it is because each cycle contradicts the last. And it's like you have a case of whiplash. Everything they're doing doesn't make sense because in the last phase, things were one way, and now all of a sudden things are different. And it's completely on their timeline and how they feel. So, as I mentioned before, it's like being on an emotional roller coaster, and there are good moments. And so every time you have a good moment in this cycle, it resets your hope. It makes you think, okay, I see the person that I thought I knew at the beginning of this relationship, and I'm just going to have to do better. This is a blame you blame yourself for the shift. I'm just going to have to do better, and what could I be doing to prevent this from happening again? And so again, it causes self-doubt, self-blame, which is not correct. You are not the person causing this. You're married to or in a relationship with a person that has a personality disorder, and they are emotionally manipulating you and harming you in this cycle, and it's causing you to blame yourself, but it's really not you. And being in this cycle keeps you very unstable, and it's very hard to get out of it. Often in these types of relationships, you can be trauma bonded to the person that is causing you the pain. And a trauma bond is where the person that hurt you or the person that's causing you the pain is the only one who can make it go away. And it's a psychological, it's almost a physical need to get this person to release you from the pain. So if only they would do blank, if only they would come in and apologize, if only they would come do the things with you that they used to do, if only they would be a little kinder to you. If any of those things could happen, then you feel a release from this pain that you've been feeling, and they're the only ones that can take it away until you decide to pull yourself out of the cycle and cut that cord and recognize that you are going to be the one that's releasing yourself from this pain because you're going to be the one that decides to leave the relationship. And that is ultimately the only way to get any relief from a partner like this.